I'd like to invite our final speaker, Ayo, to share his video and get talking.
Thank you very much, Malak, for having me. Also, just want to say thank you to the speakers from before for their insightful and very just sort of information packed presentations. And I hope I can follow on from that. I'm just going to share. So I have less of, I don't usually like to put too much info on slides. I've just got a few pictures for you just to kind of set the backdrop for what I'm going to speak about. So I think demilitarizing has been covered, as has decolonizing health in a way. I'm going to look at medical sort of education as a whole, decolonizing that. I think some information has already been given in terms of what I've done and what I've been into, but I was a sabbatical officer at my students' union in the academic year of 2017 to 2018 at UCL, and I'm currently a final year medic there, so I'll be a doctor next year, God willing. So in terms of kind of what I have seen and what I did, I think what I would kind of explain it as is that myself and people at the time, and also people who set up this kind of work for me, I think were definitely part of a historical moment. And I'm going to kind of go on to explain what that was. So we ran a campaign at UCL called Decolonize UCL. And this was kind of the logo we had. The building there is the UCL portico that they use on a lot of their branding and things. So we thought it was appropriate to use that to show how white supremacy and racism and colonial mentalities keep universities like UCL in sort of chains of knowledge production, of colonial knowledge production. So just go to the next one. So I'm going to start off speaking about these three. So again, this were some of the ID cards we kind of made for these three individuals. Some of you may know them, some of you may not. But to explain the significance of these three individuals, they can be described as the fathers of eugenics, although Francis Galton was the principal kind of coiner of the term and some of the main concepts there. When we say eugenics, what do we mean? We mean a pseudoscience, a fake science, the fake science of generally white supremacy, ableism, and classism, so that the people in society who were racialized as whites had what we'd call a white skin color, who were of the upper classes and also who were able-bodied, had no disabilities, would be seen as the best kind of human, essentially. So U kind of meaning good, EU meaning good, genetics, so good genetics is what they were trying to create. And obviously, you know, this is a very dangerous thing to put into society. Francis Galton was the father of this. Petrie and Pearson, you could say, were his proteges, especially Pearson. And Galton was actually the cousin of Charles Darwin. And Darwin actually agreed with, it's recorded that Darwin actually agreed with Galton's views, although you won't find this in your normal sort of day-to-day textbooks. And you can see expired is kind of the time, the years that they died. But even though they died at that time, so 1911, 1936, 1942, they left a legacy which has still continued on today. If you look at their writings, and the writings, you know, we've got other people involved, people like Immanuel Kant, Joseph de Gobineau, who have all kind of written on, you know, race and racism, race, not racism, sorry. And they ranked races. So of course you would have those racialized as white at the bottom, and those racialized as black, those racialized as white at the top, and those racialized as black at the bottom. In between those, you would sort of get, in descending order, you would get those who are seen anyway to be as close to whiteness as possible, or as being as subservient to whiteness as possible. Even though these were perceptions, they weren't actual realities. So you'd have, Chinese people or East Asians coming straight after white, and then you'd have South Asians, and then you'd have Black people. Of course, the world is a lot more diverse than that, but the thinking of these individuals was very, they had very simplistic characterizations of people, which were damaging at the end of the day. So, the three of them in the different types of work they did. I mean, Galton, he was the inventor of the statistical regression model, which kind of looks at the correlation between, so when you look at a graph and you can see kind of things going up like this, there's a equation for that. And a mathematical equation, when you put all your values in, if the number is closer to 1, you've got a positive correlation. If the number is closer to -1, you've got a negative correlation. If it's closer to 0, there is no correlation between these points at all. So he created that. And so he's also seen as one of the fathers of statistics and mathematics and all these kind of things. And three of them worked on different things, like I've forgotten which one of them it was now, but they would have they had a sort of a device which kind of mapped out all the hair types, with straight straight hair being seen as a correlation for intelligence. They'd also measure skull sizes and correlate that to intelligence. And of course, if you had hair like mine, what we'd call a 4C type of hair or 4B type of hair, whatever, basically the kinkier and more coiled hair types, this was indicative of having, being less intelligent, right? And this, these sciences and these things they created, this ranking system of allocating a value to you because of your skin color and because of your geographical location, because of the class you fell into, and because whether you had disabilities or not, they used this to allocate value to human beings. And this was not just localized to the UK. There were national and international eugenic societies, which also Winston Churchill was a senior member of, right? So you've got heads of state who are joining in on this. Hitler actually used this science as one of the principal intellectual drivers for the Holocaust. It was also used within that ranking system as well. Jews actually, as I should mention, were seen as being less than as well. They weren't actually, they were unincluded from that kind of bracket of whiteness, according to these three. So we kind of see the way the damaging effects of allocating value to people because of their geographical location, because of their perceived race, because of how they're racialized, because of their skin color. And it was also used as one of the intellectual drivers for the tragedies and the genocides of the British Empire, right? So this nefarious pseudoscience, fake science, is housed in our institutions. And I would call these individuals social influencers of their time. And actually their ideas are still having social influences till now, right? So their legacy has not just disappeared. And I'm gonna sort of show some more evidence for that. So this happened in, this was exposed in January 2018 while I was as a sabbatical officer. At the time, I think I had like a chest infection. I was like very under the weather. And I remember seeing this come up. I literally had to haul myself out of recovering from illness to like do something with this, but because at every institution, there are different battles going on where you have student activists, academics, professional services staff members, and maybe some members of management who are trying to push for change, anti-racist, anti-imperialist change and decolonial change, actually. But the university tends to co-opt these ideas or to manipulate them into sort of, let's say, dampen them down into just diversity and inclusion initiatives, taking out the punch out of these ideas, the radical nature of these ideas, from them, right? And so for me, when I saw this, I felt like this was the time to strike while the iron was hot. You know, UCL so essentially there were academics who had been linked to UCL, but also to institutions around the world, some from Australia, some from the US and different places, who were holding conferences at UCL. I think they've been doing it for 3 to 4 years at this point. Toby Young, who you'd also know as the director of the Free Speech Society, and he was part of, I think, the Office for Students at the time, was also a prominent attendee of these, and he also had written prominent things for this conference. Things that were discussed there, the most, things like, what are the most effective ways to drown migrants, right? Policies to do that. Do women have smaller craniums, therefore making them subservient individuals, right? So these were some of the ideas going on there. How do we solve the Jewish question? How do we solve the Muslim question? What's the effective way to phase Black people out of our societies? These were the ideas of being housed at this, on campus. So what we did actually at the time is we held a protest, and we were outside the Vice Chancellor's office. And, from my time in kind of student activism, I found people at the top of institutions to really value their egos, reputations, and money, right? So these are the things we started to really press upon, reputation and egos especially. So we were chanting, where is the Vice Chancellor? He's hiding, because he was. When this came out, a statement was released about how, this is abhorrent, but at the same time, we need to uphold freedom of speech. And the things I just listed to you, I think if they are to come in the bracket of freedom of speech, so, our society is going to be in big trouble if we allow such to happen, right? So we also, I also attended an academic board meeting and confronted the provost, the Vice Chancellor there, in front of over hundreds of academics, just trying to, hold into account. There were also other academics and sort of lending their support. There were students who were involved in this collective effort, right? And because of that, we were able to push and maneuver the Vice Chancellor and senior management to create a center on the study of race and racism, which is now headed up by Paul Gilroy. And that's doing community engagement, it's doing research, it's doing events, and it's teaching a course on the different aspects of race and racism. And this is what happens when you push and you try to collectively organize, against those who are standing in the way of justice. And for me, I really did feel like it was, again, obviously it doesn't right all of the wrongs that happened to my ancestors and other people who were wronged by the pseudoscience of eugenics, but I felt like it was a step in the right direction, at least, for getting some kind of reparations for those individuals of past and present. So the legacy that is still left today, I'm going to look at a little bit of education at UCL, but I'm also going to, then I'll branch into the medical field. And then I'll stop and we'll open for questions to the panel. So we can obviously see here the legacy that was left. You've got the Pearson Reading Room, the Gorton Lecture Theatre, the Pearson Building, the Petrie Museum, right? The significance of having these individuals there is because when you look at these racist, white supremacist individuals, when you read their works, you can even, the arrogance of how they speak and how they view themselves is very apparent for you to see. They wanted to be venerated. They wanted to be uplifted. They wanted to be respected, right? And they wanted to force their ideas on the rest of the world, even if it meant the genocides of millions of people. In their minds, they deserve this. So I know a lot of people we sort of saw in the Black Lives Matter kind of uprisings against the racism of George Floyd and Black people worldwide, the killing of George Floyd. That people, in Bristol, they ripped down statues of slave masters and prominent racists, right? And again, I think these things were very cathartic. At UCL, because of the actions that have been done, they have apologized for their role in eugenics. Whether the apology is sincere or not is up for debate, but the apology is there, and a recognition of the contribution is there. They've also now taken down these names, Some people may call this a rewriting of history. I disagree. We shouldn't omit and take out the fact of what these guys did, right? And some people say, well, they also did some good stuff. I don't know if there's anything that can overshadow intellectually contributing to the genocide of millions of people. If anybody has something that can write that, please let me know. In terms of inventions and positive contributions, please let me know. I don't think there is any. But because of what they did, they should not be venerated, but they should still be spoken about. They should still be in books. Both sides of the things they contribute to should be there, but they should not be venerated. And so I think taking these things down, although it's important, we still need to have that education there where we include these guys in explanations of the detailing of history, but we also, at the same time, we also include more Black, brown, and more diverse kind of writings and experiences in those curriculums as well. So that's just a little bit on that. In terms of the medical field, so as I said, I myself am going to be a doctor next year, God willing. And I definitely think it's been interesting for me to see how racism and white supremacy has kind of sort of manifested itself in the medical field and the medical sphere. So an example I can kind of give you, just looking historically and looking now, is the Tuskegee sort of syphilis experiment. So in a place called Tuskegee in America, I think it was in the 1940s, 50s or 60s, around that time. As an experiment, Black people were infected with syphilis and they were not given any treatment. And this was done so that the effects and the symptoms could be recorded. And obviously that has now led to discoveries on treatment of syphilis, right? There is, I think her name is Henrietta, but I've forgotten her surname, whose cells were taken from her without her permission and were used to sort of, they were used for cancer research. I believe she had a certain type of cancer. I think it was either ovarian or cervical cancer. And this cancer actually killed her, right? But her own cells were used to benefit millions today. But again, the test subject was a Black person and a Black woman because her cells were seen as having resistant properties, right? And so she never saw a penny of that. And she was never able to benefit from that. So I think she's a really interesting story to read into, not getting any compensation and also being a test subject in that sense. Unethical tests were done as well. So there are loads more kind of examples of this. I think there's also an aspect of mistrust between healthcare services and people from POC backgrounds, Black, brown, Eastern Asian, there's a distrust there. For example, I'll give you another example. So if we look at your kidney, which is essentially the filter of your body, right? Because of the bone density that Black people have, it is said that they have a higher filtration rate than the rest of the population. And because of that, the threshold for a transplant for a Black person whose kidney is failing is higher, right? And so what we see in Western countries all over the world, especially places like the US, is that you see Black people whose kidneys are failing, but they're not getting transplants because there's a cutoff and they haven't gone under that cutoff. So even though, of course, within Black people, you're going to get a variation. Some of them may be high, some of them may be lower. But because there's a blanket kind of threshold, people who will often fall below this threshold, but a lot of the filtration rates are estimated, so they're not actually measured, right? So they're just perceived to not be falling under this threshold. They end up dying of kidney failure because they don't get the transplants. They're not high on the list. They're not high on the priority list and the metric and the algorithm. So there was also Pearson Publishing published something, I think, as recent as 2014 or 2017. It wasn't that long ago. It was a book for nurses and medical practitioners in the UK. And this had stereotypical sort of, just stereotypes of different ethnic groups. And I think it said on there, Black people are used to pain, and they will not speak about their pain because they believe pain and suffering is part of life. So things like that, right? These things are all contributing to the way healthcare professionals see and view Black people, right? Why do Black women in the UK have a 5 times higher rate of maternal mortality than their white counterparts? Because we're seen to be, able to bear more pain, right? And if you go back to the writings of the individuals I've just spoken about, we are described in very barbaric and animalistic ways, mulish, in fact, and this obviously contributed to things like slavery, right? Black people are stronger, they can tolerate more pain, they are more animalistic, so they can take on more of this strain, right? And this feeds now, look, we go back to the healthcare system, right? We can be screaming in pain or be telling you that, I think something's wrong with my health or my baby, and they're not listened to, right? There's a lot of research in the US stating this, but not so much in the UK, but the stats are showing there's a disparity, right? And I know I've got a story of pretty much everybody I've got a story of everybody in my family, including myself, who has faced disparagement from the healthcare system, right? I had my uncle, for example, and I just finished on this kind of last story. My uncle had a blood pressure of 200 over 110. And just for some perspective, the normal blood pressure is 120 over 80, and high blood pressure is seen as being 140 over 90, right? So he had one of 200 over 110. He had headaches, he was seeing black spots in his eyes, and he was getting dizzy, and sometimes he'd have blackouts. The people taking care of him, he would report this, and he was supposed to essentially be on at least 3 or 4 drugs to be able to help control this. He was only on 1 until I told him about this and told him this was wrong, gave him the guidelines of what drugs he should be on. He went and had that conversation, and they told him, we're really sorry, we should have done something about this. We should have listened to you. Why is it that our health literally needs to be in jeopardy? He was on the brink of death any day. He could have had a seizure that would have killed him. That's seen as being, they call it malignant hypertension. It's so high, right? It's very, very high. Why is it that we need to be on the brink of death or have even died for our statistics to now count, for us to be done, due diligence to be done towards us? And I come back to the writings of these individuals. This is why we must unpick this. This is why we must study this. And this is why we must understand how the past has shaped the present. Thank you very much.